All right, looks like we're diving into some fascinating stuff today. Lots of material on how those super successful entrepreneurs manage their time and energy.
Yeah, seems to be a hot topic. And for good reason, right?
Totally. We've got excerpts from Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time, plus, some personal stories sprinkled in. I always love those.
Oh, for sure. Personal stories are where the real magic happens, where the lessons hit home.
Absolutely. So it seems like what you really want are some strategies you can actually use yourself.
Definitely. I think this deep dive is going to answer some big questions for you.
Okay, like what? Give me the big questions.
What are the common pitfalls that lead to, well, burnout?
Burnout is the worst.
The absolute worst. We'll also look at how those wildly successful entrepreneurs, think Oprah, Richard Branson, how do they structure their time?
Okay, yeah. I definitely want to know their secrets.
And probably the most important question for you. What can you start doing, like today, to get more control of your time?
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So Dan opens the book with this story about Stuart, a software entrepreneur, right? Nearly worked himself to a breakdown. Can you relate?
Ugh. Stuart's story, it's classic, right? A classic example of hitting what Dan calls the pain line.
Pain line. Okay, got to hear more about this.
It's that breaking point where the pain of doing work you hate or just the sheer volume of it becomes too much. You either change or you end up sabotaging your own success, which is what almost happened to Stuart. And it happens more often than you'd think.
That is scary. It's not just some motivational tale either. Dan cites a UC Berkeley study, right? Showing entrepreneurs are way more likely to face mental health challenges. Depression, ADHD, even substance abuse.
It's true. That pressure cooker environment can really take its toll.
Yeah, it can be brutal.
It's interesting, though. Dan's personal story kind of mirrors Stuart's in a way. He had a really rough childhood, ended up in prison.
Well, in prison.
Yeah, in prison. And that's where things took a turn. A total life-changing epiphany.
In prison. I got to hear this.
He found a Java programming book, became obsessed with it. He loved how code was so predictable. Write the code, same result every single time.
Interesting.
Complete opposite of the chaos in his life. And that idea, creating systems to bring order, it runs through the entire book.
I can see that.
He carries that lesson with him. It's all about making things predictable, even in the unpredictable world of business.
Yeah, makes sense. It's like a lot of entrepreneurs, they thrive on that get stuff done mentality.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is great. But without the systems, it's a one-way ticket to Burnoutville.
Exactly. Dan talks about how, he started a couple of businesses after getting out of prison, drove them both into the ground.
Oh, no. What happened?
Working like crazy, but not effectively. That's where he developed the buyback principle.
Okay, buyback principle, what's that all about?
It's the idea that entrepreneurs should use their resources to buy back their time.
Buy back their time. I like where this is going.
To focus on the stuff they excel at and enjoy. The high-value tasks that move the needle.
Okay, yeah, I think I get it. And this is where the DRP matrix comes into play, right?
Bingo. It's a visual tool to categorize those tasks. How much energy do they give you and how much money do they actually generate?
Interesting.
Really helps to see where your time is going. Make some strategic shifts.
Okay, but in real life, how does this actually work? Can you give me a real-world example?
Think Oprah Winfrey. Dan uses her as an example. She's mastered what he calls the production quadrant, where those high-energy, high-money tasks live.
Oprah. High energy.
Yeah.
But isn't she running like a massive empire?
She is. But for her, high-energy tasks are probably things like creating content, connecting with her audience, sharing her insights, the stuff she's passionate about.
Right, the stuff that makes her Oprah.
Makes her incredibly valuable. It's interesting. She only spends like 2 hours a day on traditional business tasks.
Wait, 2 hours? Seriously?
Seriously. The rest is personal growth, learning, things that fuel her.
2 hours. Man, that makes you think. Makes you wonder where the rest of us are spending our time. Yeah.
For real. Most of us are probably spending way too much time on things that drain us. Not enough on the things that light us up.
That's the delegation quadrant at work, isn't it?
It is. It helps you figure out those tasks you should be ruthlessly delegating.
Okay, time to get ruthless. I like it.
Or outsourcing. Free up your time, your mental energy. Dan even has a formula for this. The buyback rate.
A formula! Hit me with it.
It's pretty straightforward, actually. It's 1/4 of your effective hourly rate. So let's say you make $100 an hour, your buyback rate would be $25.
Okay, I'm following.
Anything you can pay someone else to do for less than that, seriously consider it.
Makes sense. You're not just thinking about the cost of delegating, but what it costs you to not delegate, right?
You got it. It's a whole mindset shift.
Yeah.
You start seeing delegation as an investment
In your time.
in your most valuable asset,
Yeah.
your time. But it's not always easy.
No. Especially for those entrepreneurs who love to be in control, hands-on with everything.
I hear you. But what about those tasks you're good at? Maybe even enjoy, but they're still keeping you stuck, you know?
Dan calls that the replacement quadrant. Can be a sneaky trap.
Sneaky. How so?
It feels productive because you're using your skills, but it prevents you from scaling your business, reaching your potential. It's like you're in the weeds instead of seeing the whole forest.
I can totally see that. And isn't there like a deeper psychology at play here too? Like some entrepreneurs are actually addicted to the chaos.
100%. Dan talks about this. It's real. Entrepreneurs, especially those from, let's say, chaotic backgrounds, they can thrive in unpredictability. It's a superpower.
Right.
But too much chaos, it leads to self-sabotage.
Oh, yeah. Been there, done that.
Huh.
So how do we break free from this chaos addiction?
You got to recognize those patterns of self-sabotage and put systems in place to overcome them. He calls them the 5-time assassins.
Time assassins. That sounds a bit dramatic, don't you think?
Maybe a little, but it's true. These patterns, they're real. More common than you think.
Okay, so who are these time assassins?
We've got the staller, hesitant on big decisions. The speed demon rushes in without thinking. The supervisor micromanages everything.
Oh my gosh, I know a few supervisors.
Then we have the saver, pinching pennies to the point it hurts. And lastly, the self-medicator, turning to unhealthy habits to cope.
Oof. That one hits close to home for a lot of us, I'm sure.
And Dan gets real, shares his own struggles with alcohol, work-life balance. It's valuable because it's authentic. He's been there.
I think that's what makes his work so relatable. He doesn't sugarcoat it. So
Yeah.
overcoming these time assassins, first step is just recognizing them, right? Understanding where they come from.
Exactly. Once you see them, you can start to put those systems in place, build a more, let's say, sustainable way of working.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What are these systems? Tell me everything.
That's where we get into the practical stuff, the nitty-gritty, building a more fulfilling way of working. You ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
One of the most powerful systems is the replacement ladder.
Replacement ladder. Okay, I'm listening.
It's this framework for delegating responsibility as your company grows. You break free from those lower-level tasks that are holding you back. You climb the ladder, so to speak.
Ooh, I like a good analogy. So how many rungs on this ladder?
5. Each rung is a key hire that you should make as your business expands. And each one is tied to a feeling. You know, a feeling you might be experiencing as an entrepreneur.
Feelings. Okay. What's the first rung, that first feeling?
It's all about that feeling of being stuck, drowning in emails, scheduling meetings, just spinning your wheels.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
That's when you know it's time to hire an admin assistant. They'll handle your inbox, manage your calendar, become your gatekeeper.
Simple, but I bet it's a game changer.
It is. Dan emphasizes that you should never be the first person answering an email or scheduling a meeting. Never.
So true.
He tells this great story about Richard Branson's assistant, Hannah.
Oh, yeah, Hannah. I think I've heard of her. Wasn't she like a legendary assistant?
She was incredibly skilled, shielding Branson from distractions. She was ruthless with his time.
Ruthless. Gotta love that.
It allowed Branson to focus on the big picture, the strategic stuff only he could do.
Makes sense. Even the most successful entrepreneurs rely on systems and support.
Right, you need it. Okay, ready for rung 2.
Hit me with it.
This one is about feeling stalled. You're growing, but things are bumpy. Maybe customer service is slipping or you're missing deadlines.
Okay, yeah. Stalled. Not a good feeling.
It's not. That's when you need a head of delivery, someone to streamline those processes, create a more consistent, positive experience.
Makes sense. It's not just about getting things done. It's about doing them well, right?
Exactly. Customer experience is everything. Doesn't matter how amazing your product is if you can't deliver on your promises.
So true. What about when you hit a ceiling? Like you're feeling capped in terms of growth. Is that next?
That's rung 3. Bring in the specialists, the marketing and sales experts to accelerate that growth. You start to see the real power of a team. You're not the bottleneck anymore. You're the architect, building a system for scale.
Love it. You're not wearing all the hats anymore. So once you've scaled marketing and sales, what's the next feeling?
Hopefully the next feeling is overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed. That doesn't sound so good.
It can be a good thing because that leads you to rung 4.
Okay, you've got me intrigued. How is overwhelmed a good thing?
Because it means you're ready to build out a dedicated sales team. They handle the demand, close those deals. Dan tells this funny story about hiring a salesperson who outsold him.
Wait, really? He got outsold by his own employee?
He did. It's a reminder that sometimes we don't even realize our own limitations. Letting go can lead to massive growth. Okay, ready for the final rung.
Bring it on.
Rung 5 is all about flow. You've got your leadership team. You can step back from the day-to-day and focus on the big picture.
The dream. You've built the machine, it runs itself.
Kind of, but it takes time, effort, and the right people. You can't just magically make it happen.
Of course not.
Yeah.
But even with the right team, how do you keep things running smoothly? Everyone on the same page.
That's where the playbooks come in. Standard operating procedures. Capture those best practices, create a system for everything, make it repeatable, scalable.
The McDonald's approach, right? Systematize everything.
Exactly. Dan's not just talking about those big complex processes either. It could be simple things too, like how you respond to customer inquiries or onboard new hires.
Okay, makes sense. But writing all those playbooks, that could be a full-time job in itself.
It can feel overwhelming, but Dan has a clever trick for this. The camcorder method.
Camcorder method. Okay, I'm picturing those old school camcorders. What do you do? Film yourself working.
Pretty much. You record yourself performing the task step by step. Then someone turns that recording into a written procedure.
So simple, yet so brilliant. No more agonizing over every little detail.
It's all about working smarter, not harder. Remember that.
Okay, so replacement ladder, playbooks. But what about just our daily habits?
Yeah.
Little things we can do to, like, claw back some of our time.
Dan calls those time hacks. One of the best is no upward delegation.
No upward delegation.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I need an explanation on this one.
It's about training your team to bring you solutions, not problems.
Ooh, I like that. So instead of coming to you with a problem, they have to come with at least one solution.
At least, preferably 3, and their recommended course of action. It's not about complaining, it's about taking ownership.
Empowering them to be problem solvers. That frees up so much mental space for you.
Exactly. It's like giving them a mini problem-solving playbook.
Love that. Okay, what other time hacks can we implement? Like right now, give me some more.
Let's see, there's the meeting sync. That's a repeatable agenda for your recurring meetings, makes them so much more efficient.
Oh my gosh, yes. Meetings can be such a time suck. I need this in my life.
Then there's the definition of done. Make sure everyone on your team understands what done means for every single task.
That is key. So much confusion and wasted time happens when people have different definitions of done.
Right. It avoids rework, miscommunication, all that.
These time hacks, they're little things, but I can see how they'd make a huge difference.
They really do add up. But even with all this delegating and systematizing and time hacking, it all comes down to having the right people, right?
You need that A-team.
Uh-huh.
What's Dan's take on hiring?
He's got this cool approach he calls test-first hiring. Learned it from Seth Godin, the marketing guru.
Seth Godin. Okay, now I'm really interested. So what's this test first thing?
The basic idea, don't hire someone until you've actually worked with them.
You mean like a trial period?
It's more than that. It's about designing your hiring process to simulate the actual work. Think test driving a car before you buy it.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So how do you do this test first hiring? Give me the steps.
6 steps. It starts with defining the role, then casting a wide net for candidates.
Got it. Getting lots of options.
You need lots of options. Then you filter, use a simple application process, weed out those unqualified applicants.
Okay, so you're being really selective about who makes it to the next round. What happens then?
Dan suggests having candidates submit a short video. Assess communication skills, personality fit. It's way better than just a resume.
A video? That's clever. A chance to see their personality shine through. I like it.
It's like a mini audition. And then comes the test project, the core of the whole test-first approach.
Okay, so this is where they actually get to show their skills, right? Like a real-world test drive.
Yep. Give them a project similar to what they'd be doing if they were hired. It's the best way to gauge their actual abilities.
Brilliant. So you're paying them for their time, of course.
Absolutely. It's fair. And then if you find the perfect candidate, the focus shifts. Now it's your turn to sell them on the opportunity.
That's a good point. It's a two-way street. You're building a team, not just filling a position.
You're building a team of A players. But even with the dream team, you still need leadership. Dan makes a distinction between transactional management and transformational leadership.
Interesting. What's the difference?
Transactional management is all about the tasks, the deadlines, very top-down.
Okay, kind of old school management style. What about this transformational leadership then?
Transformational leadership is about empowering your team to achieve outcomes, even if it means letting go of some control. It's a different mindset.
Sounds great, but how do you actually do that? Empower your team without creating total chaos.
One concept is the idea of other people's monkeys.
Other people's monkeys. Okay, now I'm really lost.
It's an analogy, right? It means you don't want to be carrying your team's problems and burdens.
So don't take on their monkeys.
Exactly. Give them the tools to solve problems themselves. So instead of saying, please spell check the blog posts, you would say, the blog posts must always be error-free.
Interesting. It's still the same message, but you're not dictating how to do it.
Exactly. It's subtle, but it changes the whole dynamic. You're trusting them to figure it out.
Love it. But let's be honest, things aren't always smooth sailing. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be a need for feedback. How do you handle those tricky situations?
Well, this is where Dan gets personal again. He tells this story about how he avoided a difficult conversation with an employee and it backfired big time.
Uh-oh. I'm sensing a lesson here.
Big lesson. It's about those tough conversations, the ones we all hate, but they're essential.
I know. Avoiding them just makes it worse in the long run. But how do you have those tough conversations without, making things worse?
He talks about radical candor. It's a way of giving and receiving feedback. It's honest, but respectful.
Honest and respectful. That's a tough balance to strike.
It is. But Dan has a 5-step framework for this. He calls them clearing conversations.
Okay, I'm all about frameworks. Give me the steps.
It's an acronym. CLEAR. Create a warm environment. Lead them to offering critical feedback. Empathize. Ask if there's more. And reject or accept the feedback.
Wow, okay, that is comprehensive. Covers all the bases.
And Dan emphasizes having these conversations regularly, one-on-one, as a team, to create a culture of continuous improvement.
Not just dealing with problems, but preventing them in the first place.
And retaining top talent, which is so much better than constantly having to replace people.
Makes sense. Invest in your team. But this all seems geared toward freeing up your time so you can focus on something bigger. What is that something bigger for Dan?
That's where we get to the really exciting stuff, the 10X vision.
Ooh, 10X vision. I love it already.
It's about thinking big, setting goals that are 10 times bigger than what you think is possible.
10 times. Wow, okay. That's a lot of X's.
Yeah.
So not just business goals.
Not just business. It's about your whole life, creating a life that's extraordinary. Dan uses this great story, the story of Club Penguin, to illustrate this.
Club Penguin, that online game for kids.
The one and only, eventually got acquired by Disney,
Oh, yeah. I think it was a huge deal, like hundreds of millions of dollars or something.
$350 million.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, but how does Club Penguin relate to this 10X vision?
The founders, they started with a simple idea. Create a fun, safe, virtual world for kids.
Makes sense.
But they didn't stop there. They were relentless, poured their hearts into it. They had this vision way bigger than just creating a game. They wanted to build a global community for kids.
That's inspiring. So it's not just the goal, it's the vision behind it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's got to be something that truly inspires you, something that motivates you to overcome obstacles.
So how do you create that vision? How do you go from a dream to something real?
Dan has a 2-phase process for this. Phase 1 is all about dreaming without limits. No constraints, no doubts, no fear. What would you achieve?
Okay, I can do that. Dream big, no limits.
Let that imagination run wild. Then, phase 2, you take that dream and turn it into a clear, actionable vision.
Okay, so less dreaming, more doing.
More like dream first, then create a plan. Dan recommends breaking it down into 4 areas: team, business, empire, and lifestyle.
Okay, 4 areas. Let's break them down. Team, that's like, who do you need on your side to make this happen?
Yep. What skills do they have? What kind of culture are you building together?
And business, that's getting really specific about what your business looks like at that 10X level, right?
You got it. What are you offering? Who are your customers? Revenue, profit margins, get clear on those numbers.
Okay, and empire, this is where you go beyond a single business.
Think multiple businesses. Investing in other companies, building something bigger than yourself.
And finally, lifestyle. That's the fun part. How do I want to live when I achieve all this?
It's about designing your ideal life. Where do you live? How do you spend your time? Who are you surrounded by? The whole picture.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it that way. It can be a little overwhelming, though. Where do you even start?
That's where the preloaded year comes in. It's a strategic planning tool. It's about taking that massive 10X vision and breaking it down into yearly, quarterly, even monthly milestones.
Chunking it down. Make it feel less daunting.
Exactly. But even then, there's so much to do. How do you stay focused?
Ah, yes. The million-dollar question. How do you avoid those shiny objects?
Dan has a simple test. Ask yourself, is this a hell yeah opportunity?
Hell yeah. I like it. Straight to the point.
If it's not a resounding yes, stick to your plan. Don't get sidetracked.
So easy to get distracted, especially as an entrepreneur. But doesn't all this planning make life, kind of boring?
Dan would actually argue the opposite. He says having a plan gives you more freedom, more spontaneity,
More freedom. How so?
because you're not constantly reacting to emergencies. When those big things are taken care of, you can say yes to the fun stuff, the last-minute adventures, those creative impulses.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Less stress, more fun. But what happens when you achieve that 10x vision? Do you just retire?
Dan's not big on retiring, at least not in the traditional sense. He says entrepreneurs never really stop.
So what do?
They use the buyback principle to keep creating, keep growing. They find new challenges, new ways to make an impact. He tells stories about how he balances it all: work, family, hobbies, personal growth.
He's living the dream. The buyback life.
He is. And that's what we want for you, too. It's more than just managing time. It's about building a life you love, a life that truly reflects your values.
So inspiring. So what can our listener do today to get started, to start living that buyback life?
Start small. Think about one task you're doing that you could delegate. Even just one. Use that buyback rate formula. How would that change your week, your year?
It's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Start small, think big. We've only just scratched the surface of Dan's book.
Just a taste. But hopefully it's given you some ideas.
Some tools to start building the life you want.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Now go out there and buy back your time.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Better Every Day. We hope you found some actionable insights to help you on your self-improvement journey. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on future deep dives. And if you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, small steps every day lead to big changes. See you next time.